You've probably heard the California real estate pitch more times than you can count. But lately, that glossy narrative has started to splinter. The earliest signs of stress aren't showing up in the picture-perfect neighborhoods or along the prestigious tree-lined streets you see on postcards. Instead, the pressure is building in the suburbs, the very areas that exploded during the era of cheap borrowing, work-from-home optimism, and bidding wars that sent prices drifting far beyond what local incomes could reasonably support. Mortgage rates are hovering in the low 6% range, yet millions of current homeowners are locked into loans near 3%. That divide has effectively paralyzed move-up buyers, cooled demand, and transformed routine price reductions into flashing warning signals. Homes aren't vanishing from the market in a weekend anymore. Listings are lingering. Price cuts are becoming more common. Sellers are finding themselves in competition again. On this episode of Discover the Cities, we're taking a road trip across 10 California suburbs where the dream of homeownership is beginning to feel less like a milestone and more like a financial squeeze. Stick around, because our first stop might be the most revealing example of all. It was designed as a vision of the future, carefully master-planned, commuter-friendly, marketed as the next big thing. But here in 2026, it's starting to look more like a cautionary tale. Number 10. Santa Clarita. We're starting at the northern edge of Los Angeles County, in a suburb that long marketed itself as the quieter, safer alternative to the city grind. Santa Clarita became the go-to destination for families who felt the valley was getting overcrowded, overpriced, and just plain overwhelming. The promise was simple: larger houses, newer developments, extra breathing room, and stronger schools. For a time, it genuinely felt like you could escape Los Angeles pressure just by driving a few exits farther up the freeway. But affordability has a way of catching up with you. Sooner or later, the commute wears you down. Sooner or later, the monthly payment does the same. And once the pool of qualified buyers starts shrinking, the housing market can shift from stable to shaky almost overnight. Here's where the strain shows up in 2026. Santa Clarita is deeply dependent on mortgage financing. This isn't a market dominated by cash-heavy investors. It's driven by families stretching their budgets, convincing themselves that long-term appreciation will make today's sacrifice worthwhile. When interest rates were low, that stretch felt manageable. With rates still hovering in the 6% range, the very same house transforms into a completely different financial equation. Now, layer in another subtle but important change unfolding across Southern California. The return-to-office movement may not be universal, but it's happening enough to alter daily routines. Even adding 1 or 2 extra in-office days per week can turn a tolerable commute into a recurring stress test. Fuel costs, vehicle maintenance, childcare adjustments, scheduling headaches, and lost personal time. All of it becomes part of the true cost of homeownership, even though none of it shows up in the property description. That's why suburbs like Santa Clarita are beginning to display a clear new pattern. Homes are sitting on the market longer. Sellers are pricing based on peak-era comparable sales, emotionally anchored to numbers from a hotter market. Buyers, on the other hand, are focused almost entirely on the monthly payment, because that's the number that determines survival. Negotiations aren't about granite countertops or backyard upgrades anymore. They revolve around a single question: can someone realistically carry this payment for the next 7 to 10 years? Number 9. Palmdale. Palmdale has long been the desert workaround to Los Angeles prices. When coastal neighborhoods in the valley started feeling financially out of reach, buyers looked east. The deal was straightforward: give up proximity to the city in exchange for square footage, a backyard, and a proper garage. More house, less location. That compromise only holds together when 2 things cooperate: flexible remote work and manageable monthly payments. In 2026, neither feels guaranteed. Palmdale can seem steady on the surface, almost peaceful, until momentum shifts. Demand here depends heavily on payment-sensitive buyers: first-time homeowners, growing families upgrading carefully, and households stretching just enough to step into ownership. In markets like this, even a modest bump in interest rates doesn't merely cool activity. It sidelines entire groups of buyers. Yes, sticker prices remain lower than much of Los Angeles County, but financing costs are dramatically higher than what people grew accustomed to during the ultra-low rate years. Sellers still anchor their expectations to peak comparables. Buyers, meanwhile, fixate on monthly obligations that feel more punishing than promising. Then there's the desert risk factor. This region carries a reputation for wind events, wildfire exposure, and relentless heat. Insurance companies underwrite it as though it's perpetually one rough season away from major losses. When premiums spike, attention shifts immediately from list price to total monthly burden. And that's often where transactions quietly fall apart. In a suburb already operating on thin margins, it doesn't take much to tip the balance. A handful of job disruptions. A few landlords discovering that rental income no longer covers the mortgage. Insurance renewals arriving like an unexpected tax bill. Slowly, supply begins to outpace demand. The pattern tends to unfold in stages. Fixer-uppers stall first. Then well-maintained homes shave their prices slightly. Eventually, motivated sellers make deeper cuts. Those reductions reset comparable sales. Appraisals grow more conservative. Contracts collapse. Buyers hesitate, sensing leverage. If you live in the Antelope Valley, you can already feel the difference. The frenzy is gone. What's replacing it is caution, longer negotiations, more scrutiny, and a noticeably slower pace. Stay with me. Hit like and subscribe, because next we head into the Inland Empire, where new builds, investor-owned properties, and hard affordability ceilings are starting to collide. Number 8. Eastvale. Eastvale captures the Inland Empire boom in a single frame. Fresh construction, carefully planned neighborhoods, parks full of families, it projected momentum and optimism. For years, it almost felt like a loophole in the Southern California housing market. You could purchase a newer home, remain within commuting distance of Orange County job centers, and still benefit from the broader Southern California appreciation surge. But Eastvale's rise happened during a period of unusually easy financing. When mortgage rates were historically low, buyers could rationalize higher prices because the monthly payment still felt manageable. Fast forward to 2026, and the equation has flipped. Now, the payment is the market. And when affordability becomes the defining metric, mortgage-reliant suburbs priced near their upper limits start to look exposed. Here's the challenge Eastvale faces. It's not a high-end luxury enclave with an endless stream of affluent buyers. At the same time, it's not deeply discounted housing that automatically attracts demand. It sits squarely in the middle. That middle depends on families stretching carefully into homeownership. And households operating at the edge of their budget have very little tolerance for unexpected costs. Right now, unexpected costs are everywhere. Insurance premiums are climbing. Some neighborhoods are seeing rising HOA dues. Utility bills are higher, commute expenses have increased, even auto insurance is more expensive. As the total monthly outflow grows, buyers don't just negotiate harder, they often step away entirely. Then there's the broader Inland Empire supply dynamic. Builders launched projects during the boom years, and construction pipelines don't shut off overnight just because buyer demand slows. New homes continue to hit the market, even as the pool of qualified buyers shrinks. Inventory expands, and sellers gradually lose leverage. Layer in investor activity. Many investors purchased under the assumption that rent growth would comfortably offset their mortgage payments. But with rates staying elevated and rental increases flattening, that math no longer works in some cases. Investors who aren't generating positive cash flow are typically the first to list. They reduce prices sooner. They offer credits. They close quickly. And every discounted transaction resets comparable values a little lower. That's how downturns tend to unfold. Not as one dramatic collapse, but as a sequence of adjustments that build on each other. If you own an Eastvale, the primary risk isn't invisibility, it's competition. Buyers have choices, including brand new construction. Builders can subsidize mortgage rates and layer in incentives that individual resale sellers simply can't match. And incentives function as quiet price reductions. When builders move, resale listings have to react. Number 7. Menifee. Menifee represents the promise of breathing room. It's where many buyers headed once Los Angeles, Orange County, and even parts of Riverside started to feel financially out of reach. The appeal was simple and powerful. Newer subdivisions, noticeably larger homes, and enough space to finally feel comfortable. But Menifee also fits the classic exurban risk profile. Markets like this thrive when confidence is high, employment feels secure, commuting is flexible or optional, and borrowing costs are low. In 2026, none of those pillars feel completely solid. This area is especially sensitive to the monthly payment equation. When mortgage rates hovered near 3%, choosing a bigger home farther inland seemed like a logical upgrade. At today's rates, still sitting in the 6% range, that identical property carries a dramatically heavier monthly obligation. For many households, that shift alone determines whether they qualify for a loan at all. Then there's the day-to-day lifestyle factor. Extended commutes come with real costs: fuel, vehicle wear and tear, lost time, and accumulated stress. As more employers require at least partial in-person attendance, even a few days per week, the advantage of living farther out begins to erode. The trade-off doesn't feel as compelling as it once did. Menifee also faces a structural challenge: housing similarity. A large portion of the homes were built around the same time, often with comparable floor plans and features. In a booming market, uniformity doesn't matter because everything moves. In a slowdown, it becomes a liability. When buyers can choose from 10 nearly identical properties, price and concessions drive the decision. The most motivated seller ends up setting the benchmark for everyone else. The city has also attracted what you might call escape buyers, people leaving denser, pricier areas in search of value and space. But escape-driven demand is fueled by optimism. If buyers begin to suspect prices might soften, they pause. And hesitation is dangerous for a suburb that depends on steady inbound demand to maintain momentum. Here's how the downturn pattern typically unfolds. Sellers list homes as if it's still 2021, pricing according to peak-era expectations. Buyers, however, are operating in 2026 realities. Initial offers come in lower than anticipated. Sellers push back. Time passes. Then the reductions begin. Credits get introduced. Listings linger and start to feel stale. Add investors to the mix. If rent growth plateaus or vacancies tick up, investors prioritize liquidity over perfection. They list sooner. They accept less. They move quickly. And each lower closing price recalibrates the market. Number 6. Rancho Cucamonga. We're staying in Southern California, but now the focus shifts to a suburb that, for years, has been viewed as a dependable bet. Rancho Cucamonga has carried the reputation of being a safe harbor: solid schools, established neighborhoods, and a location that feels strategically positioned between Los Angeles and the broader inland empire. On paper, it checks all the right boxes. Buyers long believed Rancho offered stability without giving up long-term upside. In 2026, though, that sense of stability is being pressure-tested by a single powerful force: monthly payment shock. This is not a cash-dominated market. Most transactions here rely on financing, which means the monthly mortgage payment isn't just a line item, it's the entire deal. During the ultra-low rate period, buyers could stretch their budgets and still feel reasonably secure. Today, with rates sitting far above those historic lows, the exact same home commands a significantly higher monthly obligation. And when that payment crosses a psychological affordability threshold, demand doesn't gradually taper off, it can vanish. There's another layer many people underestimate until they feel it firsthand. The total cost of ownership is rising from multiple angles. Insurance premiums across California have climbed. Utility bills are higher. Routine maintenance costs more than it did just a few years ago. Buyers are also more aware of climate concerns and regional fire exposure. Even if a specific property isn't perched on a hillside, the broader risk profile affects perception. You can see the shift most clearly in one key metric: days on market. When listings linger, it signals hesitation. Sellers often resist what that implies. They remember peak-era comparable sales, so they price aggressively and expect buyers to validate those numbers. But today's buyers are making decisions based on monthly affordability, and every additional dollar feels consequential. Once price reductions begin, the psychology changes quickly. One adjustment invites firmer negotiations. A second reduction establishes a new benchmark. A handful of lower closing prices can quietly reset values for the entire neighborhood. Rancho isn't operating in isolation either. Buyers comparing options can look at nearby markets like Ontario, Upland, or Fontana, especially in newer construction corridors. With alternatives available, purchasers become less willing to pay a premium for homes that feel average. Number 5. Chula Vista. We're heading back into Southern California, this time spotlighting a suburb with serious brand power. For years, Chula Vista was considered the opportunity pocket of San Diego County, the place where families believed they could still buy a proper home with real square footage without paying steep coastal premiums. It carried the reputation of being the practical, forward-looking version of San Diego. Desirable, expanding, still within reach. But in 2026, even strong markets run into limits. And here, that limit is affordability. Chula Vista relies heavily on financed buyers. With mortgage rates still well above the ultra-low levels of a few years ago, the monthly obligation on a typical home feels punishing, even for households with solid earnings. The problem isn't a lack of interest in the area. Demand hasn't disappeared emotionally. It's been constrained mathematically. When the payment no longer works, buyers step aside. And when they step aside, listings stall. You can see the change in subtle ways. Sellers who once anticipated bidding wars are now met with quiet, open houses. Properties that would have flown off the market linger long enough for buyers to scrutinize every detail. Suddenly, questions get sharper. How old is the roof? What are the HOA dues? Will insurance premiums rise next year? What's the real monthly number after taxes, fees, and assessments? Because in Chula Vista, the mortgage is only part of the equation. Many neighborhoods include HOA fees. Some developments carry special assessments. Insurance costs are climbing across the region. Even if the list price stays firm, the all-in monthly expense can climb high enough to freeze activity. There's also the issue of competition. Buyers comparing options can look toward nearby communities like Otay Mesa, East Lake, or National City. Some will push farther inland if it means trading commute time for affordability. When alternatives exist, sellers lose pricing power quickly. And once leverage shifts, the dominoes begin to fall. First come isolated price reductions. Then they become more frequent. Repair credits and closing concessions return. Buyers stop competing with one another and start negotiating directly against the seller's tolerance for waiting. Number 4. Irvine. Next, we visit one of California's most iconic suburbs, Irvine. For decades, it was treated almost like a housing fortress. Top-rated schools, meticulously planned neighborhoods, pristine streets, access to well-paying jobs. Everything about the city screamed stability. Its reputation was so strong that many buyers assumed prices here couldn't meaningfully drop, confident that demand would always catch up. But 2026 is proving that even Irvine isn't immune to the same challenges rippling across the state. A stellar reputation can't offset the reality of an unaffordable monthly payment. Homes in Irvine are highly rate-sensitive. Because the properties are expensive, even minor shifts in mortgage rates can add thousands to a monthly obligation. That reality narrows the pool of buyers more than most people realize. And when rates remain elevated, it narrows further. Early signs of stress appear in buyer behavior rather than headline prices. Listings are lingering longer than expected for a market this desirable. Buyers pause, negotiate, and start asking for concessions that were once rare: credits, rate buydowns, repairs. And once they see that negotiation is possible, psychology begins to shift across the broader market. There's also hidden financial pressure. Many communities charge HOA fees and additional assessments, which effectively function like extra mortgage payments. In a high-rate environment, these costs push borderline buyers out of the market entirely. Irvine's housing mix adds another layer of vulnerability. A high concentration of condos and townhomes means units compete directly. When multiple owners list simultaneously, it quickly becomes a pricing contest. The first reduction sets the new benchmark, and price adjustments can cascade through the market rapidly. Investors play a role too. The city's strong brand attracted investor interest, but investors are driven by cash flow. If rents fail to cover mortgage payments and fees, they sell. And investors tend to act quickly, cutting prices to exit, pulling comparable sales down for everyone else. So, What does a correction look like in Irvine? Longer days on market, price reductions becoming routine, credits reappearing, and buyers gaining negotiation leverage in a city that once felt untouchable. Number 3. Daly City. Next, we move to a suburb that's both highly desirable and highly exposed to the new realities of 2026. Daly City. For decades, it served as a pressure relief valve for San Francisco, close enough to the city to enjoy Bay Area life without paying the sky-high urban premiums. Transit options, steady demand, and a long-standing belief that values here were rock solid all reinforced its appeal. But the market is teaching a different lesson. Even sought-after suburbs can soften quickly when monthly payments climb too high and buyers stop rushing. Daly City's prices are substantial, which makes it extremely sensitive to mortgage rates. On expensive homes, even small rate shifts can increase the monthly payment by an amount that feels like paying a second rent. As a result, buyers are no longer guided primarily by list price. They're guided by what they can actually afford each month. And once that shift happens, everything changes. The first signs show up in behavior. Buyers hesitate. They take longer to compare options. They negotiate harder. They request inspection credits, repair allowances, or help with closing costs. Just that change in approach shifts the power dynamic away from sellers, even before any headline prices move. Next comes the inventory dynamic. Many owners are locked into low-rate mortgages and are unwilling to sell, keeping supply tight. But the homes that do hit the market usually belong to sellers who must move, job changes, family needs, or financial pressures. Those sellers often reduce prices quickly, establishing new comparable sales that pull the market down. Daly City also faces the challenge of older housing stock. Many homes need maintenance or updates, and in a hot market, buyers used to overlook these issues. In a slower market, buyers aggressively factor in costs for roofs, drainage, foundations, and upgrades, using them as leverage that drives down prices. Add in rising awareness of insurance and climate risks. Coastal exposure, storms, and increasing insurance premiums across California are now part of buyers' calculations. When ownership costs are expected to keep climbing, buyers demand discounts upfront. This is how a correction starts in a popular suburb. It's rarely dramatic, empty streets are rare, but urgency fades, sellers compete with each other, price reductions become routine, and buyers feel confident enough to wait. Number 2. Brentwood. Staying in the East Bay orbit, we now turn to a suburb that embodies the modern California trade-off: Brentwood. For years, it was marketed as the ultimate escape hatch. More space, newer subdivisions, family-friendly neighborhoods, and just enough proximity to Bay Area jobs that the commute seemed worthwhile. During the housing boom, Brentwood surged because it felt like one of the last places where a middle-class household could still secure a sizable home without completely breaking the bank. But by 2026, that escape route is starting to narrow. Brentwood is showing the classic signs of a suburb entering a fragile phase. First, there's mortgage sensitivity. This is not a cash-heavy market. Most buyers rely on financing. When rates remain elevated, monthly payments rise sharply, shrinking the pool of qualified buyers almost immediately. Brentwood's market depends on a steady stream of families willing to stretch their budgets, and when that flow slows, everything flips. Second, the commuter reality matters more than ever. Brentwood works when the trade-off between space and distance feels manageable. But even small increases in office attendance turn commuting into a real daily cost. Time, gas, childcare, logistics, and stress all add up. When enough buyers start rejecting that lifestyle, demand softens quickly. Third, there's competition from similar inventory. Many neighborhoods were built during the same era, with comparable layouts and features. During a boom, that uniformity doesn't matter. In a slowdown, it gives buyers leverage. When multiple, nearly identical homes compete for the same buyers, pricing and concessions become decisive, forcing sellers to adjust. From there, the chain reaction begins. Listings linger longer on the market. Sellers start cutting prices. Lower sales establish new comparables. Appraisals tighten. Deals fall through. Buyers grow cautious. Sellers become motivated. the market starts chasing itself downward. Brentwood is also vulnerable to investor behavior. When rent growth slows or carrying costs rise, investors often sell first and cut prices aggressively to maintain liquidity, which further pulls the market down. Number 1. Temecula. Here we are at the top of our list, the California suburb most exposed to a housing correction in 2026, Temecula. For years, Temecula was marketed as the ideal Southern California escape. Good schools, newly developed master plan neighborhoods, and a lifestyle that made buyers feel like they were buying value, not just distance. During the boom, it drew attention. Remote work made the commute feel manageable, and historically low mortgage rates made monthly payments seem completely reasonable. But in 2026, that story is being put to the test. The first challenge is the monthly payment wall. Temecula isn't a cash-heavy market. Most buyers rely on financing. With rates now far above the ultra-low levels of previous years, the same homes carry monthly obligations that constrain families. When the payment passes a certain threshold, demand doesn't just slow, it drops sharply. The second factor is the ex-urban trade-off. Temecula works when buyers feel the lifestyle justifies the distance. But distance isn't free. It comes in the form of commute time, fuel costs, and the fatigue of being far from major job centers. Even modest return-to-office expectations can tip that calculation, causing buyers to pause, negotiate, and delay rather than rush in. The third pressure point is competition. Many neighborhoods feature similar homes, which means near-identical properties directly compete for the same buyers. This forces sellers into reductions, credits, or concessions. Once concessions become normalized, the market psychology shifts. Next come the forced sellers, people relocating for work, facing divorce, or under financial pressure. They often list first, negotiate quickly, and set new comps. Those lower comps tighten appraisals, which can break deals and make buyers even more cautious. Investors add another layer of stress. If rents don't cover mortgage payments and rising costs, they sell, and they tend to cut prices faster because liquidity is the priority. That combination, payment pressure, distance pressure, and direct competition, explains why Temecula tops our list. It's not an overnight crash, it's a slow-moving correction. Listings linger, reductions spread, and sellers have to fight harder just to move their homes. If you live in Temecula, what are you noticing? Are homes taking longer to sell? Are price cuts becoming more common? Tap like, subscribe to Discover the Nation, and share this with anyone in California who's thinking about buying or selling in 2026.